Recently, in my quest to own all of the 1992-ish X-Men in Marvel Legends, I picked up the animated style Morph figure. And after, running a Q-tip full of nail polisher over him and erasing all of those animation lines, I got a figure that reminded me of his appearance from the animated series, but in comic book style, I guess you could say. And he's an interesting character because while he appeared in the animated series, he was basically dropped in there purely to get knocked off in the first episode to create a sense of danger for the team. And, of course, led to the greatest line.
This one's for you, Morph!
But, yeah, fast forward and we now have a animated Morph figure, a character that was really just dropped in order to show consequences in storytelling. And this wasn't our first Morph figure, and that's what I wanted to kind of talk about today is an interesting phenomenon in the sort of, I guess, toy collecting, toy manufacturing genre when the tail wags the dog. In other words, when a character who's put into content just to sell more toys, to basically, add to the storytelling, winds up selling a toy. So, yeah, I know you're like, wait, what are you talking about? And why are you showing a picture of Winnie the Pooh? Well, that's because this is actually a great example of one of these characters designed to sell content and sell merchandise. So there's a character named Gopher from the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. This little cute guy, right? Who's always doing odd jobs and, fun stuff like that. So this was a character created for the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. And he actually acknowledges that.
Somebody call for an excavation expert. I'm not in the book, but I'm at your service. Go first. The name is...
And what he means when he says he's not in the book, it's not referring to not being in the yellow pages. It's because he wasn't in the book. He was the only character on the show that wasn't from the original source material. It was kind of a joke. I'm not in the book, but I'm still here. I'm a new character. And he's gone on to, much like Morph, as I noted before him, and we'll actually swing back to Morph, to actually be merchandised, a character that was designed just for storytelling to make to add humor, to add value to the content, has now gone on and, again, sort of tail wagging the dog, where this character is now being sold as merchandise for a show that he was designed to support so the show could sell merchandise. And, again, this is such an interesting phenomena that doesn't really exist outside of action figure collecting. I mean, Gopher's gone on to even appear in video games and had storybooks written about him. And the idea that a character that's literally just brought in to add a little extra spice to content, or in the case of Morph, to show that there's a sense of, consequence, if you will, the fact that he sort of got bumped off, that's a whole other story. This is a phenomena. And it's worth exploring, which is why we're talking about it today, because there are a handful of characters out there. One of the more prominent ones, that's probably Orco from Masters of the Universe. So Orco is not part of the original line at all. He was designed specifically to be a comedy character to appeal to the kiddies who were watching the show, who then ideally would go on to buy more toys. So, of course, that's why it's incredibly ironic that a character who winds up almost as a, afterthought, winds up becoming one of the more popular characters in the entire franchise and has been revised and has evolved and has maintained a presence in almost all of the toy lines. You pretty much can't find a Masters of the Universe toy line without Orco, which is amazing because he was not supposed to be in the toy line. He was added just for the content, for, humor, more or less. And even when he got an action figure in the old line, this was something like, whoa, they're doing an Orco? That's crazy, because the show, the content gave birth to Orco, and then now Orco's giving birth to content. This weird, circular craziness. And while, there have been definitely evolutions in Orco, going from coming with small magic tricks to giant exploding energy balls, always one of my favorite things to include with an action figure when you can, he has become an absolute staple of the franchise, and having a toy line or content that now doesn't have Orco in it almost seems weird. So, yeah, he has lived on in a second life beyond just being created as comedy relief. He's now actually become three-dimensional physical product, and that is a term that the toy industry and I guess also content creators, they call permanence when a character goes from being just in content, being, animation, movies, to actually something physical you could hold, referring to that as permanence. And it's a big deal when a character goes through this because they're no longer just a device for storytelling, but they can actually be touched, manipulated, played with, and that makes them a bigger part of pop culture. And I also think it's crazy that I've gotten to work on Orco action figures and help continue this character's life beyond just being part of content. All right, let's go back to Morph because we skipped over him a little bit in the beginning. And as I noted, while he did die in the first episode, of course, no one dies in comic books, and he was brought to life, back to life with, really cool 80s eyeshadow, because that's what makes somebody mean, right? Or the undead. Anyway, the point being is he was dropped in, as I noted earlier, to the series simply to create a sense of drama, that something could happen to these characters, that there were consequences, and that you should actually worry about their survival. Now, originally, the character was Changeling, but that had to be changed, no pun intended, because, well, one, he had a really bizarre-looking purple hat, which wasn't going to look that cool on screen, and even though he is listed as a actual legitimate member of the X-Men, his time with the team was, well, limited when he disguised himself as Xavier. And the reason that he couldn't be Changeling anymore is because of this dude. And you're probably saying, well, wait a minute, that's Beast Boy. Well, yes, that is Beast Boy, but he used to be in a comic book where his name was Changeling. And because of that, Changeling was trademarked by DC, which meant Marvel didn't have access to that name, so Changeling just simply became Morph, and that made him sort of his own character outside of that, even though he then actually wound up being in the comics as Morph, and then that version of him got another action figure of him. Oh my gosh, it makes your head explode. The circular nature of this. Characters creating characters, creating characters. But again, you just don't see this outside of animation and toys based on animation for kids. The ability to create a character for the show just to sell more toys to make the show more interesting that winds up being a toy to sell more toys. And yes, we had a few more figures in the, I guess, 90s. You could say in the vintage era. God, the 90s is vintage now. And I'm excited to have a Marvel Legends version to put with the rest of my 6-inch figures, even though it took me, 40 minutes to erase all of those darn animation lines, or whatever you're going to call it, cell shading. Yeah, I'm not a fan of cell shading. But yeah, Morph's become a character that legitimately has his own fan base now. And even though he was just created to bump off and move content. All right, well, we got to obviously talk about one of the biggest ones of all time, and that's, of course, Harley Quinn and her introduction in Batman the Animated Series. No, she does not go back to the 1940s. She was created in the 1990s by Paul Dini, purely, again, much like Orco and Morph, as a one-off character just to move the story forward. She was just designed to be someone for the Joker to talk to in the episode, A Joker's Favor. I think it was the 6th episode of the first season. Now, of course, she would go on to have a very intricate backstory where the Joker winds up, poisoning her mind. She's his therapist in prison, but he winds up being her therapist and twists her mind, and she goes, all Harley on him. So there's obviously, don't need to explain how popular the character has become over the many decades, to the point that even her live action is now one of the more popular cosplays. She started off, though, as Paul Dini remembering Arlene Sorkin on Days of Our Lives in the mid-'80s, skating around in a clown suit. Somehow this just stuck in his mind. He was friends with Arlene, and she had sent him a tape of her sort of highlights from Days of Our Lives. And this just became one of those moments that he could not get out of his head. And he thought, having a female clown would be a great thing as a counterpoint to Joker to at least move the story along. And in fact, he offered Arlene the chance to voice Harley. And that's how she became the iconic voice of Harley Quinn there. And the character obviously became more than a one-off, designed just to help that script get from point A to point B. Well, it wound up giving birth to a character who has become more merchandisable than Batman. Yes, Harley Quinn outsells Batman as far as action figures and merch if you have a DC license. So, yeah, that's why she shows up in everything, even, hero toy lines as a sort of quasi-anti-hero. I don't know. Talk to Taylor Swift about that one. Her first figure, of course, being in the Batman animated series toy line from Hasbro. And I remember when I saw this on shelf, again, much like with Morph, I was blown away. I was like, whoa, they did a Harley figure? She's just like, a background character they created for the show. And now she physically has a toy, permanence, as I said. Heck, they've even made toys of her pets, the jackals, or not hyenas, that she, runs around with. Dangerous to have hyenas. Trust me, you don't want hyenas as pets in your house. And yes, much like Orco, I've also had the privilege of getting to work on Harley Quinn figures. So my fandom of Batman the Animated Series continues to be as surreal as Motu. My favorite, though, and the example that, well, I guess favorite means you love the most, they mean the same thing, is Firestar. Firestar is from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, the show from the early 80s, and this was my introduction to Spider-Man just in general. I first saw this show, and that's how I learned about Spider-Man, and I thought that Spider-Man, Iceman, and Firestar were like a thing. And it's amazing how many years it took to get a proper Marvel Legends of Firestar, which we got about a year ago, and there have been quite a few figures of her over the years, but it's been a slow trickle. Now it's gotten to the point that she's sort of, I guess, been accepted as being very popular. Marvel's figured this out. Back in the 80s, she could barely sell her own miniseries, but I always just assumed she was in Spider-Man's comic with him. And when I got Spider-Man comics and learned that she wasn't, I mean, this was a one-off, I was like, whoa, but I thought, they had a thing going, or, at least they were friends with spider benefits. I don't know. But yeah, I was kind of shocked to learn that they had nothing to do with Spider-Man in the comics. They were just put together in the show. And the reason Firestar and Iceman were there was because kids love elemental concepts, and fire and ice is very easy for a kid to relate to. Originally, the fire was going to be provided by Johnny Storm here from the Fantastic Four, but unfortunately he wasn't available. And it's not for the same reason he was unavailable for, other material. I mean, he obviously had history of teaming up with Spider-Man, but much like he was replaced in the Fantastic Four cartoon with Herbie the Robot, in this case it wasn't because they feared kids were going to set themselves on fire playing out the adventures of Human Torch. It was actually for legal reasons. And Human Torch was, at the time, with the rest of the Fantastic Four, not available. So a new character had to be created for the show. Like Harley, like Orco, like the Gopher, another character designed specifically for storytelling purposes to add a fire character, and having a female adds a sense of drama. Of course, in the comics, Firestar did go on to have a life of her own, becoming a member of the New Warriors in the 90s, and eventually she got an updated costume. But yeah, that classic costume from the show, and to get toys dedicated to that show, it's amazing how long it took, really. I mean, again, yes, we're being treated to a lot right now, and darn that Iceman with his cell shading. But it wasn't really until Toy Fair magazine did their giveaway figure of a very inexpensive to create redeco figure that was Firestar from the Toy Biz 5-inch line. And then we finally got recognition for Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends in the early 90s with, well, actually, no, it wouldn't have been the 90s, it would have been the early 2000s with the Marvel Universe 4-inch figure line. The first time we ever got actual toys that said Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. It's amazing that, for years this show influenced so many of us. Now, of course, Marvel/Hasbro has recognized the power of Firestar and are slapping her on every toy line because, one, she's incredibly popular, and a lot of us were introduced to Spider-Man this way. So, while it took many years to get a proper Marvel Legends, we're now being treated to, well, Firestar every year or so, even with different colors on Aunt May's dog. So, yeah, we're good. We're with our Firestar, and if you grew up knowing Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, hey, now you can legitimize that, at least on your toy shelf. So, that's my examples of characters created for shows to sell toys that then got to sell their own toy. What do you think? Have I missed anything on this list? Any key characters, ones you grew up with? Let me know in the comments. And as always, the best way to support this channel is to share videos with others. And thank you ahead of time for doing that. I appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the comment section, and as always back here on Spector Creative. Thanks for watching.